Today we'll be studying Tehillim chapter 142. This is one that if you've been attending any of the Tehillim gatherings, this is often one that is said. I'll put it up on the screen for a moment just so we can see what we're talking about before we start talking about it. So this one goes, Maskil LeDavid. It's a song for David, B'yotoba me'arat tefillah. He's praying while he's in a cave. And the rest of the Tehillim talks about Hashem, about David HaMelech pouring out his speech while he's distressed, and he has so many enemies, and he's calling out to Hashem to protect him and to save him from this dire situation that he's in. And it concludes, "Hotzia mi masger nafshi lodat shemecha." Take my soul out of a confined place to praise you, Hashem, and let the righteous crown you with me, as we'll discuss. So, first things first is, what cave is David HaMelech in? So in the 24th parak of Shmuel, King David is actually being chased by Shaul HaMelech. There's an unfortunate episode between them, and he's actually being chased, and he's running for his life. And David and his few hundred men, they go and they hide in a cave near Ein Gedi, and he's being chased by King Saul and 3,000 men. And it was at that point, when he was hiding in the cave, being pursued by 3,000 men with the king, that David composes this Tehillim, B'yotoba me'arat tefillah, while he's in a cave. Now, obviously, when we say it nowadays, and as Jews have said it throughout history, we're not necessarily thinking about David's cave, but we're thinking about the various caves that human beings find themselves in. A cave is a place that's enclosed, it's dark, you don't know where to turn, you don't necessarily see any direction or clarity about your situation. You're in a cave. And it's interesting to think about. The past few days we've been studying various Tehillim, and there have been different images of the situations of struggle that a human is in. We started with Ma'amakim. You could be in the depths, like you're in a pit, like looking upwards to try to find help. Or a Sinai Leharim, you're surrounded by these tall, impassable mountains. And here we find David in a cave. So there's all this different imagery, but it all kind of boils down to one idea, where you just feel isolated and overwhelmed by the challenges that are being heaved upon you, and there's nowhere to turn. You're in a pitch black cave, you're in a pit, you're surrounded by mountains, there's nowhere to turn. That's the general feeling that David is calling from so often. Like we were saying during the Hallel, Mina Mitzar Karatiya. I call Hashem from the narrow, confined place, from the narrow strait. This is a place where we most often will call to Hashem in the most passionate way. There is a very interesting thing. In the Talmud, when it refers to prayer, it doesn't call it tefillah. It doesn't necessarily call it tefillah. Another name for prayer in the Talmud is rachameh, or rachamim, mercy. That's the name, the nickname for prayer is rachamim. And now that's very significant. The first appearance of rachamim in all of creation happens in the parsha we'll read this week. Hashem wanted to create the world with the attribute of justice, where everything is exactly as is deserved, and nothing is extra, everything has to be just so and just right. And Hashem saw that the world could not endure this way. Human beings are going to sin, and we won't be able to survive in a situation of pure justice. So the expression is Ra'a she'en ha'olam yechol litkayem. He saw that the world could not exist or endure, and therefore he introduced this concept called rachamim, mercy. And through mercy, Hashem gives us time to improve and to retry, and 1,000 times he'll let us do it over. And mercy is what allows the world to endure. So I once heard from Rabbi Moshe Shapiro. He said, that's why prayer is called rachamim. The ultimate prayer and the truest form of prayer is when you realize that the world cannot endure. I cannot exist. I cannot continue to exist without you, God. Without you stepping in and introducing this new thing that I'm asking you for, health, security, etc. Without that, I cannot exist. And therefore, tefillah is called rachamim, because just like rachamim is what allows the world to exist, and without it, the world cannot endure, so too, with our prayer, we're recognizing that the world we cannot endure without you, God, without your supporting us. So it's a very powerful place to call from Hashem. I want to point out, if you have the Tehillim in front of you, a very fascinating transition that happens. It's a nuance, but if you keep your eyes out, you'll notice this happens in different places. It's really fascinating. Then it says, Maskil LeDavid, David is in the cave, and he utters a prayer. Kuli el Hashem ezak. My voice calls out to Hashem. Kuli el Hashem et chanan. I plead to Hashem. So he's referring now to Hashem in the third person. Hashem is like out there. I pour my speech before him. I tell him about my pain. We're talking about him. God is him. He's over there. And then suddenly in verse number 4, in Pasuk Dalet, it says, Beit atef alai ruchi. As my spirit collapses inside of me, like he's just so stricken with pain that he's bending over in Sarah. Ve'ata yadata netivati. God, you know my course. Suddenly he's speaking to God directly, as if God is right in front of him. What an interesting shift. It started as Kuli el Hashem, Hashem is out there, and now he's speaking and addressing God directly. What causes the transition? Beit atef alai ruchi. As my soul collapses within me. When he gets to a plate of complete desperation, Beit atef means like an atifa is when something is folded over another thing. When a person is like just keeling over in pain, where you feel such tremendous agony that you're folding over yourself. And that moment, when you realize that there's really nothing else I can turn to, there's nothing else I could possibly do. At that moment, Hashem becomes extremely close. And you recognize that he's been there with you, and he is there with you at this very moment. Then in the darkest moments of a human being's life, those are often the times where we'll feel Hashem's presence the closest, which is a very powerful idea. And for the rest of the Tehillim, David is conversing with Hashem directly, as if he's sitting there with him in the cave, and he's talking to him, and he's saying, Habet yumini rev eni makir, za'akti elecha. I'm calling out to you, Hashem. It's a very powerful thought to think that when a person is humbled to such an extent, suddenly he finds himself even closer to God. After all, God is always there. He's in the foreground, but we'll put him in the background. At the climax of Kriyat Yam Suf, we said, Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai. Who is like you, ba'elim? The Gemara says you should read it as ba'elmim, and the silent ones. That Hashem is the ultimate silent one. That with all of our, goings and comings throughout the day, we're doing everything we need to be doing. And he's sitting there patiently waiting for us to notice him, but he's completely silent. And then when things get a little bit more intense, when all the distractions are gone and just we're faced with a complete awareness of our desperation, at that moment oh wow, Hashem has been here the entire time. Mi kamocha ba'elmim Hashem. The silent one, Hashem, has been with us the entire time. That's a beautiful thought to consider, the shift in perspective and the appreciation that Hashem is indeed with us, so close even in times of struggle, and especially in times of struggle. I want to finish with the final psukim. In pasuk chet, in the final pasuk, it says, "Hotzia mi masger nafshi leodot et shemecha." Hashem, take me out of prison, take my soul out of its confinement, leodot et shemecha, so that I can say thank you to you. Which is an interesting form of prayer. You're not saying, take me out of prison so that I can be free. You're saying, release my soul from its prison so that I can praise you. Because we appreciate that ultimately the goal is to create a close relationship, which is the ultimate joy. That a human being, whether we know it or not, we're constantly seeking to fill a void, which is the desire to connect to Hashem. That is the only thing that will satisfy our nefesh. And then David prays, Bi'achtir tzadikim tikitig molalai. May other tzadikim, may righteous people use me as their crown when you do good for me. What that means is that I want to set an example for everyone. That I was in a time of struggle, and I prayed to Hashem, and I trusted Him, and I was saved. So in the future, when people are struggling, they'll say, hey, look, David also trusted in Hashem, and he was saved. So David is asking that I should become the precedent. I want to be the example of Hashem saving people, that they'll use me as the example, which is what we do every time we read this Tehillim. So that's all I have to say. With your permission, if you'd like to stay on, we could read the Tehillim together. I'll put it up on the screen for those of you who don't have a book. And here it's on, it should be Rizchut Kol Acheinu B'nai Yisrael, that Hashem should help them and strengthen them and heal them and bring the Geulah b'mihera b'yameinu. Maskil LeDavid, b'yoto b'me'arat tefillah, kolel Adonai Yazak, קולי אל אדוני אתחנן, אשפוך לפניו שיחי, צרתי לפניו אגיד, ויתעטף עלי רוחי, ואתה ידעת נתיבתי, באור אחזו אהלך, תאמנו פח לי. הבט ימין וראה ואיני מכיר, אבד מנוס ממני, אין דורש לנפשי. זעקתי אליך אדוני, אמרתי אתה מחסי, חלקי בארץ החיים. הקשיבה אל רינתי, כי דלותי מאוד, הצילני מרודפי, כי ימצאו ממני. הוציאה ממסגר נפשי להודות את שמך, בי יכתירו צדיקים, כי תגמול עלי. אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנותנים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה, המקום ירחם עליהם, ויוציאם מצרה לברכה, ומאפלה לאורה, ומשעבוד לגאולה, השתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן. Thank you all once again. May Hashem answer your tefillot. May we hear good news.
Thank you. Can we send us the recording?
Sure, I'll send it over.
Thank you so much. I missed
Did I just